Welcome to the Joy of Cruising podcast with your host, award-winning author Paul C. Thornton, a weekly conversation with the amazing cruisers featured in the Joy of Cruising books, comprised of The Joy of Cruising, Cruising Interrupted, new release, The Joy of Cruising Again, as well as other fun, informative global cruise personalities. It's the next best thing to cruising, hearing about cruising from the unique and diverse perspectives of Paul's amazing guests. If you hear about a cruise that interests you, book it at www.thejoyofacation.com or enter to win a free cruise for two. Again, www.thejoyofacation.com. We really appreciate your feedback, so leave us a text. Paul can't reply, but he may read your text on the air.
Hello, passionate cruisers. This is Paul, and this week on the Joy of Cruising podcast, I am delighted to welcome Bill, creator of Ritzy Travel Guide. As many listeners know, I am a serial viewer of YouTube cruise channels, watching them continuously while I work on my podcasts and will even play them on mute when listening to music. They are informative and sometimes introduce me to prospective podcast guests. That was the case with the Ritzy Travel Guide. Bill's seductive voice and accent first caught my attention, but more substantively, Ritzy Travel Guide's great content made me a regular viewer. Bill and his wife first cruised in 1997 and have never looked back. They enjoy variety and spread their cruises amongst as many cruise lines as possible, rather than sticking to one or the other line. Like me and Cheryl, they find them all different and love aspects of each. They split their year roughly into three parts: 1 Europe, 2 North America, and 3 Asia. Bill notes, "You might say we are travel nomads, love the culture and differences of each." Ritzy Travel Guide's preference in ships is those under 3,000 passengers. Bill emphatically points out they are not fans of megaships. We prefer the more intimate, conversational style of small to medium ships. That being said, we're adventurous and also book the liveliest ships, such as Virgin. We're also huge fans of the Celebrity Edge class of ships. Two of my favorites, Virgin and Celebrity. No wonder they caught my attention on YouTube. Ritzy Travel Guide also does land-based vacations, but have rarely featured them on their YouTube channel. That's about to change. Bill says starting this year, we will mix cruise and land content on our channel to have a grand tour feel to it. Speaking of grand tour, around the time this episode airs, they are embarking on an amazing journey. In February and March, they are doing a 6-week Asian trip, including jungle touring in Thailand, staying at a train-themed hotel in the deep jungle, feeding elephants breakfast from a treetop canopy, staying in a bamboo eco resort on stilts over the water, and taking an overnight sleeper from Bangkok to Chiang Mai. Take me with you, please. That's just the beginning. We'll let Bill tell you about their other plans. Welcome, Bill, to the Joy of Cruising podcast.
Hi, thanks, Paul. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
It's great to meet you virtually. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, thanks very much. I tell you what, I do absolutely love listening to your podcast. You always have such interesting guests with amazing stories.
That's my goal. You know, every time I go on a cruise, I plan to at least ask one person to be on my podcast. Sometimes, several. I just mentioned to you, I just got off the Soul Train cruise, and there's so many people that I would love to have on the show. I suspect I'll get, 3 or 4, hopefully 5, guests just from going on that cruise. So every day the wheels are turning. I'm saying, who could I bring on that is, somewhat unique and gives the listeners a unique perspective of cruising? Let's start by talking about anything you would like to share with our listeners.
Yeah, we generally try to split our year up into 3 because we love getting out and around the world and trying to see it as much as we can. I mean, you might say we follow the decent weather if we can. So we tend to be in Europe for the spring and the autumn, because then the climate's just gorgeous. It's like, I suppose you'd call it the Goldilocks season. It's not too hot. It's it's not too cold. And then we try to sprinkle in a little bit of North America from October to November and occasionally January. And then we go to Asia for the winter months, because I tell you what, there's so much to see in the Far East. I tell you what, I think Asia is really going to see a boom in cruising over the next 5 to 10 years. It's really going to start to pick up. I'm surprised that Asia has been relatively underserved until now. There are a few ships out there, but not much in comparison to the rest of the world. And I think the Orient is really going to pick up. So we like to spend time out there as well.
That's one part of the world that I have not tackled yet, and definitely high on my bucket list. Well, Asia and well, there's probably a lot of parts of the world that I haven't visited, but Asia sticks out, and Africa sticks out. So you like diversity in cruise lines. Give us some highlights of the different cruise lines you've tried.
No, we do. We absolutely love diversity. I mean, we try to go on as many different cruise lines as we can. I mean, rather than keep going back to the same line over and over again, we made a promise to ourselves right at the beginning to try to go on as many different ones as we could. I mean, obviously, budget permitting, because they're all so different, these cruise lines. As you know, they all got so many different characteristics. So I suppose probably over the years, we've been on about maybe 20 different cruise lines, because I mean, some of them come and go. They don't all hang around. So we do try to go as many different as we can.
You know, a relatively new cruise line just popped up, and it seemed like it would be I'm being presumptuous here, but seemed like it would be a perfect fit for Ritzy Travel Guide, based on you know, your YouTube videos. Have you tried Explorer Journeys yet?
We haven't, and doesn't that look smart? I mean, it looks very luxurious, very deluxe. We haven't managed to get onto that one. Have you been on it?
I'm booked. I leave March 24th.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Now, what was it? I saw recently you went on. Was it the Azamara?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of a similar size.
We're a big fan of Azamara. The problem is, I mean, if you call it a problem, all the Azamara ships are getting quite old now. They got 4. They used to belong to Renaissance. You know, the cruise line Renaissance
Yes.
that used to be knocking around and then went bankrupt just after the millennium. And they had about 8, 9 ships. And then all the various cruise lines brought up a piece here and a piece there. They got a fabulous experience. We really like Azamara. But if there was a criticism, all their ships now are 20, 25 years old.
Now, you know, I don't expect you to name all 20, but just name some of the lines that you've tried.
Well, I think we've tried just about all of them. I mean, some of them don't exist anymore. I mean, we started cruising in 1997, 98. We were on a Christmas, New Year cruise. That was out in Asia. There used to be a company called Star Cruises, which specialized in doing Asia and round to Australia. And they had beautiful ships. They were perfect size. They were about 1,200 passengers, you know, just cozy enough to so you really got to meet people, but big enough to have enough facilities. That unfortunately was a victim of COVID. We used to go on Commodore before that went. There was another fantastic one called Swan Hellenic, which was around until about 2006, 2007. And strangely enough, we went on that one 20 years later, because ultimately it went through a few changes of ownership and it ended up with Azamara as the Azamara Pursuit. So there we were on the same ship almost 20 years later under a different ownership. And Azamara did a really good job at updating that.
That's interesting to go on a ship and then go on it again 20 years later under a new ownership. Was it very different? I mean, did it look anything like the original?
When it was under Swan Hellenic was very British in feel at the time. So it felt like you were on the set of Downton Abbey. You felt like you were in an English country manor house. In a certain way, Azamara has kept that feel. The layout has been opened up a little bit. It's a little bit more open plan. I think actually in some ways that's benefited it. But roughly the same restaurants are there. The Italian was where the Italian was. The steakhouse is where that was. The rest, the layout is roughly the same. But I think they did a good job. It was done when it was under previous ownership of Royal Caribbean. Royal Caribbean owned Azamara for a while before they sold it off. And they did a good job modernizing it and updating. I think you'd call it probably small ship executive. It's not as luxurious as, say, Regent or Seabourn. It's just a notch below that. But I tell you what, you get a lot of bang for your buck. It's good value. If you can snag when they've got a sale on, like any cruise line, occasionally they have a sale. So if you don't buy it full price, if you get it when they're really trying to tempt you on, you can get a bargain to go on Azamara.
Now, have you done many luxury ships? I know Azamara is kind of near luxury. Have you done any? You mentioned Regent, and you mentioned, I think you mentioned Seabourn, Crystal, any of those?
We went on Crystal when it was on the previous ownership. Haven't been on it since it was newer. I mean, to be honest with you, we try to pitch our cruises that we don't go to the absolute top, because you just burn through your budget at a blink of an eye. And as we like to cruise 5, 6, 7, last year we were on 9 cruises. If you do all of those on luxury cruise lines, you're going to be seeing your bank manager pretty fast. So we try to balance it. So we go, I would say, majority of it on the mid-range or the premium, the lower premium range. Occasionally, we'll sprinkle in a luxury one, but not that often, because I prefer to go more often on something which we know we can comfortably afford, rather than just regretting it a few months later.
Now, let me see if I can pin you down, and I probably can't, but are you willing to give us a favorite cruise line or a favorite cruise ship?
We probably have about 4 or 5, depending on the ship size, because, they have a different experience on size. And so if we were to say which of our perennial, we like Celebrity. We feel that Celebrity is a good, solid choice. You rarely get a bad experience on Celebrity. I mean, their ships age from 20, 25 years old right up to the more modern ones. I mean, we like some of the older ones. We like the new Edge class of ships. We were on the Ascent last year, which we thought was a fantastic experience. I think their Edge class really have got a lot of things right. I mean, there's no perfect cruise ship. There's no perfect cruise line. You just try to tick as many boxes as you can. And I think the Celebrity Edge is doing well. Although, as you know, with cruise ships, there are the audience is divided. You have those who love the old world, the older style of ships, and don't want to go on the modern. We fall into both markets. We like some of the elements of modern ships and some of the elements of the older ones. I like some of the older princess ships. We've always got a soft spot for Cunard, not all of the time, but just occasionally. It's nice to dress up, put on your best tux, walk tall, and have a very quintessentially old cruise liner experience. You can imagine you're in the 50s. We like Holland America. It's often, though, is where the itinerary goes. Generally, we look at itinerary first and then think, will we like the ship? Because you've really got to make sure you're the target market for a ship, because not every ship is going to be for everybody. You can book a cruise and you think, to be honest with you, there's little or no chance I'm going to enjoy that cruise because it's the wrong type of ship. I would never go for one of the mega ship sizes such as the Royal Caribbean, the Icon of the Sea, because I'm not the target audience for that. And it would be asking for trouble if I booked that. There would be a slim to low chance that I would enjoy it. Now, if you're a family, if you're somebody in your 20s, 30s, somebody different, fantastic. But for me, I wouldn't be the target audience.
Let's go way back. You mentioned your first cruise. Say some more about that. I know it was 1997. What was the ship? What motivated you to try cruising? And then talk about your initial impressions of cruising.
Well, back then, as we were based part of the year in Asia then, there wasn't a huge choice of cruise lines. There were far fewer cruise ships around in those days than there are now. I think now at last count there's 300, high 300s cruise ships knocking around the world at any given time. Then there were much fewer. So there wasn't a huge amount of choice. So we chose one that was going out of Singapore. And that was Star Cruises. It was Asian owned by a company called Genting, who predominantly had theme parks and casinos in the region, and they thought that it would be a good money spinner to launch a cruise division. And for quite a while, it was doing very well. Asia was booming in those days. It still is now, but it really was booming. They were called the Asian Tigers in those days. The economy was growing 8-10% year on year. A lot of people were getting wealthy, and they really splashed the cash on their cruise line, Star Cruises. You got on board and it was dripping with chandeliers, all of the silverware, all of the crockery in the dining rooms. It was the best that money could buy. I don't know that they ever balanced the books. I think they were just trying to show off maybe a little bit. It was a bit like, if a Las Vegas casino decided to go into the cruise line business. It was a little bit glitzy, to be honest with you. It was probably a little bit bling. But because they didn't really matter whether they made money to start with, they thought they were in this for the long game. They spent a fortune on these ships. The ticket price for getting on in those days was surprisingly low for the standard that you got. So we loved it.
Now, leading up to that first cruise, had you been much of a land traveler?
We'll be right back.
The Joy of Cruising podcast guests receive a gift sponsored by GigSky of a 3 gigabyte cruise plus land data package valued at $60. Relying on ship Wi-Fi is slow, unsecure, and sometimes not available. And at foreign ports, travelers don't want to pay their carriers high fees. GigSky provides a solution that will save them a significant amount of money. To get your own data package usable on the ship or in ports, here is my link to GigSky. https://gigsky.pxf.io/NLOXOR. This can be found in the show notes below. For a 10% discount, use the code Joy of Cruising.
Yes, we've always tried to travel as much as we can. So when we went on a cruise, I think it's the first time anybody goes on a cruise, you're not quite sure what to expect, are you?
What motivated you to try cruising?
I enjoy the variety of getting up somewhere different every day. I mean, normally if you go touring in a car or by train, every day, if you want to move or see something different, you've got to check out of your hotel, get on some transport, check into another hotel. You waste a huge amount of time, and it's quite a headache. As we all know, the beauty of cruising is that you wake up every day, probably in a different port. You haven't changed cabin. You haven't changed ship. You haven't had to get your clothes out of the wardrobe. You just get off the ship and go about your day. I mean, to me, that was the real appeal of it all, is seeing somewhere different every day without all the hassle.
Yeah, the efficiency of it all. Were you hooked on that first cruise, or did cruising have to grow on you?
Oh, we were definitely hooked. I think within a couple of weeks, we'd gone out and booked another one. It was like that. It was instant attraction. And I tell you what, I don't know, if you were to ask the average person, I've never done a straw poll, but I reckon if you were to ask the average person who went cruising for the first time, did you enjoy it? I reckon the vast.
Well, I have done a poll. Now, I will admit that my poll is probably skewed because the people I ask are guests on the show. And if they stuck it out with cruising, they probably liked their first cruise. But I have asked just about every guest I've had, and I used to tabulate and keep a running total, and it's between 90 and 95%.
Well, there you go.
People get hooked on their first cruise. Now, I'm sure if I extended the audience to just people I meet on a cruise ship, not necessarily guests on the show, maybe that number would come down, but it would still be, as you said, the vast majority. So you booked one right away. So how soon did you cruise again?
I think we cruised just a couple of months later. We did another one around Asia, a different part. We cruised from Hong Kong up to Japan. I don't know. Have you said you haven't done Asia, right? So
haven't done Asia at all.
If you do, Japan is always one of the favorite ones. And there's so much to see, particularly if you go at the right time of year. So we went off from Hong Kong up to Japan. It was in April. So we went over the New Year first time around. So we went cherry blossom. That would have been March, April, because that's when the cherry blossom is. And that was gorgeous. It looks so beautiful at that time of year. Enjoyed that one so much. We then went and booked one for Australia later on that year.
Let's shift gears a little bit. We'll get back to cruising, but let's talk about the Ritzy Travel Guide. So when did it start, and what was your motivation in starting it?
We started a couple of years ago. And you know how it is. When you start something, you've got no idea whether it will work, whether it might snowball, how it'll evolve. You just put some videos out, you put some reviews out, and you've got absolutely no idea if it's going to take off. I mean, all you can do is pour your heart and soul into it, and then just hope that people like it, hope that people appreciate it.
I like that name, Ritzy Travel Guide. It kind of helped pique my curiosity in your channel. How'd you come up with the name?
Oh, because there's a really famous hotel in London. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called the Ritz Hotel. And it's a very historic one. It was opened by a fascinating guy who was called Cesar Ritz about 120 years ago. And he wanted a hotel that made people feel good about themselves. The moment they arrive, they feel good to be there. He wanted that on entry, everybody's problems faded away, that you'd become, I think he said, you'd become seduced by the hotel's surrounding. And it worked because it, at the time, and it still is today, it became the place to be. It was so beautifully decorated, so ornate. I mean, everybody from, I think, royalty to the early movie stars of the day, it was the who's who wanted to be there. I think Charlie Chaplin had a permanent residence there. Jackie Kennedy Onassis, she said, I think once that she felt like it was like being in paradise. The Queen, when she was younger, she used to regularly go there on a Thursday evening. And the Ritz also holds some of the best afternoon teas. So when you're not on a cruise ship, you can go and have afternoon tea there. But anyhow, so the word Ritz became a word to symbolize a feel-good feeling. I mean, I don't know if you remember that song. There was one, Putting on the Ritz by Irving Berlin, and that famous Fred Astaire routine. So Ritzy and Ritz became a word in the 50s and 60s in England. There was a slang word saying, oh, that looks a fairly ritzy place to be. And so when I was trying to think up a name for the channel, what I was trying to symbolize was what people do. You save up for something, you save up for a cruise, to treat yourself, to pamper yourself to something nice. Maybe you want to get into a fine dress or an outfit or go to a nice hotel or a vacation. So I love history. So I wanted to go back to find a phrase that conjured up the image that when you go away, you're going on a great vacation. You want things to be good. So that was the essence of it.
That was very informative. Now, let me ask you, was Ritz a forerunner of the Ritz-Carlton chain?
I don't know. That's a very good point. I'm assuming there must have been some link up. I'm guessing so, because Cesar Ritz founded the Ritz Hotel. There wasn't one before he did 120 years ago. Maybe it was. Maybe it was a link up, perhaps in the States. That's a good one to find out.
Yeah, I will get on my Wikipedia as soon as we get off the phone. I'm curious now because I hadn't heard that story. You know, Ritz and Ritzy kind of came from his name, which I did not know. So yeah, I'm curious how that. As a matter of fact, Ritz-Carlton has a cruise ship now, or maybe a couple of them.
They do. I was thinking, I made a video about it a couple of weeks ago. I put out a video about the new ships which are coming out this year, and the Ritz-Carlton was one of them. And as I was making it, it suddenly occurred to me, I ought to be on that one. Well, you know, if one wanted to spend $10,000 or $15,000, I ought to be on that one.
Yeah, when I started researching Explorer Journeys, and believe me, I'm not paying $10,000-$15,000, but that came up. Ritz's I don't know. I guess they're super yachts. That did come up in my research. So, what platforms is Ritzy Travel Guide on? And then tell our listeners how they can follow Ritzy Travel Guide on social media.
Well, we are mostly a video channel, so YouTube is our main outlet. But increasingly, we're getting quite busy now on Instagram and Facebook because, as you well know, making videos takes a long time. You've got to edit them, you've got to assemble them, then you post-production. And we found that it's quite nice just to get pictures and updates out in real time. And social media is so much quicker. So now we've got a growing presence on Instagram and Facebook. Much smaller the audience on those than we have on YouTube because we've only just started. So we're still very small on those. But we're trying to grow it because it's especially nice to post while you're away on a cruise or on a travel. People want to imagine where you are, what it's like. So I can just knock those out in a blink of an eye, whereas a video takes much longer. I also try to put a little bit of cruise news on Instagram and Facebook. So if during the week somebody comes out with some news, like Celebrity Cruises suddenly announced they want to be doing river cruising the other day, so it was interesting to mention that one. And the new Excel suddenly announced yesterday that they've got a new section coming out called the Bazaar that's going to take over the Eden complex at the back of their new Excel. So when you hear that, you just like to mention that. So I mean that's a good example of Instagram and Facebook. It's very fast.
Further thought, have you been on river cruises?
Yes. Again, it depends on the itinerary. We love, they're really good. We've done Europe. I'm afraid we haven't done outside of Europe. I suppose that's where there's most choice. So we've done going through Austria, through Germany, through France. As you know, it's a very different experience. I think you were on one last year, weren't you?
My first, it's Amma Waterways.
That's a good one.
I love it. Have you been on Amma?
Yes, but that was, I'm trying to think when it was. It wasn't recently, but it's an amazing experience, isn't it?
Yes, Amma was great. As a matter of fact, I have an episode coming up of my 10 favorite cruises, and I don't want to give too much away, but I will tell you that my one river cruise is definitely on that list.
I can imagine.
And I can tell you, I will definitely do a river cruise again. I don't know when, don't have one booked, but it's going to be hard to pull me away from Amma. There's so much I liked about Amma. For one thing, all of their excursions are included, and that's. Yeah. I think that's kind of unique to Amma. Maybe some other line. What's your favorite?
Viking often include quite a lot.
Yeah, I hear that they include a lot, but I didn't think they included all their excursions. But yeah, Viking. I hear a lot of people who like Viking. What's your, or do you have a favorite river cruise line?
We've probably been on Viking more than others, so probably I'd have to say that one. We went on Amma once. That was a year ago. Not a year ago. That was a few years ago. We've done far less river cruising than we have sea cruising, so I need to get back on one.
Mentioning Viking, have you done a Viking ocean cruise?
No, I haven't. No, I've never done one.
I've never been on Viking, so that's. I'm not going to check off everything on my bucket list because it just keeps growing because I talk to people like you. But Viking is on my bucket list. And the thing is, I'm not sure whether to do a Viking Ocean or a Viking River cruise, I think I want to try Ocean. I think my next river cruise is going to be Amma again. I don't want to stick to, I don't like, I mentioned earlier, like you, I like diversity, but that one river cruise was so perfect. It's hard for me to try something else, but that's why I was asking, what's your favorite line? In the introduction, I mentioned that you're planning to incorporate some more of your land trips on the channel to give it sort of a grand tour feel, I think were your words. Tell us about a couple of your favorite land trips. Not the one you're going on, because that is a special, I have a separate question for that. But land trips that you've done, what's at the top of your list?
We always like to be quite adventurous. On land, where it's just the same as at sea, we try not to do organized excursions because while we're still fit and able, we prefer the flexibility to get out and about and do it ourselves. So again, just like cruising, we probably move around every couple of days so that we could see different places. We go right across the world, again, budget permitting, but we are quite adventurous by nature. So we've done quite a lot in Australia and New Zealand, in Asia a lot. We've done bits around Latin America. So we do try to be quite active on our land trips.
I think the listeners have a sense of how adventurous you are because in the introduction, I gave them a mini description of your upcoming Asia trip. And oh my goodness, talk about adventure. So talk about that. You're leaving soon, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think as this episode goes out, we will be there. So there we are. I've suddenly magically transported over to Asia in the blink of an eyelid. We're going away for 6 weeks. We've always done quite a lot of land-based, but we just haven't chosen to put it on the channel. And I thought, why not? So starting this year, we're going to do a rough 50-50 mix of our land content as well as our cruise content. So we're doing quite a lot. We're going jungle touring in Thailand. We're picking up a 4-wheel Jeep and we'll bash our way through the rainforest, filming as we go. I'll be bringing all the equipment. I don't know about you, but the biggest bag we have whenever we travel is my film equipment. I'll be bringing my drone so that I can stick that up and get some great views from that 360 camera. So we're bashing across the jungle there. We then will be going on a train-themed hotel. There was a hotel designer, a very famous hotel designer in Asia, who decided, well, people like going on the Orient Express. How about I build a hotel that looks like you're on the Orient Express? Your room is a carriage, and it's done in an old traditional way. So you wake up for all the world thinking you're back in Agatha Christie Poirot days, and you're in this train compartment, but you're in the middle of the jungle. So we're in that for about 4 days. We then go to another part of Asia where we're staying in a bamboo eco resort. You feed the elephants for breakfast. You go up right at the top. It's a bit like a tree house. You sleep up all night in this tree house. And then in the morning, these rescue elephants that they bring to you. So you can get an experience of being at the same height as an elephant. And so Hopefully, if all the stars align, we'll be there filming us as we wake up in the morning, probably at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning. I have no idea what time elephants wake up. We'll probably be gently awoken by a tusk coming through the veranda. And then the elephant wants feeding. So I'll grab my camera if I'm half awake at that time of the morning to film the experience.
So that'll be how you kick off land on your channel, right? That'll be the first one.
It will be interesting to see how it goes down with the viewers, because when I set the channel up, I didn't necessarily intend to be just a majority cruise focus. I thought I would put out a majority of it. And early on, the biggest viewing figures were for cruising. I put out some on Provence in France. It barely got any views, which is a shame because Provence is beautiful. I put out some on Morocco. That was just before the earthquake they had over there. Beautiful nomadic tribes that we went to visit up in the mountains. Again, barely any views. And I couldn't understand why. But then I put out some cruise videos and they got a lot more viewing. So I thought, well, maybe people are just more interested in cruising. So I somewhat switched what I was intending to do, which was mixed, and then concentrate on cruising. But I would like to get back to what the original premise was, which is to put out mixed content. So I just hope our viewers stand by us, have a little bit of patience, try just watching a couple of them, and then hopefully it will work out. And then it's great to have variety, not just a variety of cruise ships, but variety of travel content. Because I don't think everybody who goes cruising only does cruising. I think a lot of people do other things as well. So hopefully people will have patience with us and they'll watch some of this new content as well.
Well, I can't wait to see your videos. I'm sure you'll probably have more than one about this eco jungle adventure, feeding the elephants and sleeping in tree houses. That is going to be amazing. And so at least now you have some listeners who anticipate, or some audience who anticipate that, because you're speaking to a decent slice of the cruise community right now, and that just sounds so amazing. It sounds like a almost a National Geographic documentary. I can't
Well,
wait.
I hope that we just manage to convey the atmosphere, because that would be the biggest shame if we're there and I didn't portray it right, or I didn't catch it right. Because as you know, when you wake up somewhere, some of the most enjoyable times of the day are at sunrise. You're in this beautiful location and you just hope to capture it right. You hope to do justice to it.
Now, I know you have a lot of other great cruises and travel planned. Tell our listeners about what you have coming up.
Well, just at the end of that Asia cruise, just in case people think I've completely forgotten about them and completely stopped talking about anything that floats on water, right at the end of that Asian trip, we're off to Vietnam and we're going on a junk. I don't know if this is a term or a word that people are familiar with. They're old boats. Traditionally, they used to be wooden boats. They're small boats. They can be 50, 100, 150, 200 foot long. They used to be for fishing or trading. The merchants used to go on the Silk Road from, say, India around Arabia, and they're called junks. And there's been quite a popular business to be had in Vietnam, particularly around Halong Bay, which is a beautiful, gorgeous area. If you talk about National Geographic, go and Google what Halong Bay is, because they have the most amazing natural rock formations that come almost impossibly out of the sea. And these junks you go on, it can be up to you. They can be 2, 3, 4, a week's journey, and they're luxury a lot. They're like the Ritz-Carlton of the Asian market, as opposed to they're smaller than the Ritz-Carlton. Typically, you might have 50 or 100 people on board. So small little boats. We last went on one about 6 years ago, before COVID, but they've really come along. Vietnam has done very well as an economy over the last few years. So they've really tried to bolster and boost up this new tourism initiative that they have. And so they've got a few junk companies now which are offering these trips round Halong Bay. So we're going on one of those, and they're getting quite luxurious now. In the old days, maybe it was a little bit like camping at sea. But nowadays, if you've got somebody who says, oh, they want to go on Oceania, or they want to go on Seabourn or Ponant or one of these ones, this would be that equivalent, that luxury equivalent, but on an Asian junk.
So is this considered a river cruise?
Oh, it's in the open sea. Halong Bay is like a protected water area. So it's fully at sea, it's tidal, it's at sea, but it's generally quite calm because it's protected waters. It's a bit like you used to see these James Bond movies in the 70s where they went to this exotic Asian location and filmed Goldfinger or whatever it was. You can imagine some spy coming whizzing around the corner. It's at sea, but it's gorgeous, gorgeous scenery.
Okay. What else you have coming up?
Cruise-wise, we've going on a couple of the new ones, because sometimes it's nice just to see what's coming out. So we're going on the new Princess ship, the Star Princess. That's hard on the heels of the Sun Princess. You remember the fiasco there was with the Sun Princess last year.
Did you go on Sun?
We were supposed to, but then our one got cancelled. So no, we didn't.
Okay.
And then we didn't rebook it. So I think Princess is hoping to God that the same thing doesn't happen with the Star Princess this year.
That's kind of where I am. I was really excited about going on Sun. I had it booked, and then they kept having not trouble, but they kept pushing back the opening of, I think it's called Park 19 or Deck 19 or whatever it was.
The theme park on the top.
Yeah, and so I postponed it to later in the year. I was supposed to go in February of this year, and I postponed it till later in the year, and I figured by then, Park 19 would be ready, because I wanted the complete experience. And then I saw that Star was coming out, and I said, well, I might as well just wait and go on the new one because whatever went wrong with Park 19, I'm sure they're not going to repeat it on the Star. So I'm not going to go on Sun at all, and that's no knock on Sun, other than the fact that they just seem to delay, getting Park 19 open.
Well, as you know, that Park 19 never happened, and
Right.
A lot of people who were with kids who booked it or wanted to go for that reason, and then they said, well, we'll just replace it with a pickleball court. I mean, the best ball in the world, a pickleball court isn't a replacement for the mini theme park that was supposed to be at the top of the ship.
No.
No matter how they spin it, it's not the same. So we thought, well, it will be nice to go on one of these new Sphere classes. I mean, they look amazing. It's got a little bit more people on it we'd like. I mean, it's 4,200 passengers. Normally, we would steer well clear of a ship that had 4,200 passengers. But interest has got the better of me.
Have you heard what they plan to do with? Because I hear that Star is going to be pretty identical to Sun layout wise. Have you heard what they're going to do with Park Night with that area?
Well, unless they have held a secret back that they're not divulging because they want to surprise everybody, it's very, I don't know, what would you probably use the word mundane. It's nothing like as adventurous or as exciting as was originally projected to go on either the Sun or the Star. I mean, it's going to be like pickleball, maybe basketball, a few other bits. There's from what I gather, unless they're holding it back, there's no theme park type infrastructure going in on it.
So you experience that this is an understatement to say, but you have experienced some great destinations. Do you even have a cruise or travel bucket list?
Yes. I mean, we always like going on different types of ship. I mean, for instance, we're going on the other new ship we're going on this year is the Allura from Oceania. Now, we haven't been on Oceania for a while because they were almost a very similar product to Azamara. They also had some of these old Renaissance ships. So it was the same layout. It was just how the different companies had their different food outlets and everything else. And for the longest time, Oceania hadn't come out with anything new. And then they did a couple of years ago. And this Allura is the second in this Vista class. And so we're going on that one this year. So that was a little mini bucket list in terms of trying to see how Oceania is going, because that upper premium, let's call Oceania upper premium. It's not luxury and it's not premium. So it's interesting to try that segment. And they were doing a really good deal. We're going over Thanksgiving. As you know, Thanksgiving is a bargain time to go. So many of the cruise lines give a good deal over Thanksgiving.
Now, what about bucket list destination?
I wish that some of the old destinations could come back because, as you know, there's only so many times you could go to the Caribbean. I mean, nothing wrong with it, but there's only so many times you could still go to the same ones. I mean, I would like to see the Baltic come back as it used to. In the old days, you used to get on at maybe at Copenhagen in Denmark. I remember doing that one. And you'd go up to Tallinn in Estonia, you do Norway, you do Sweden. You can still do those bits, but you can't go as far across Eastern, and certainly you can't go into Russia anymore. I don't know, did you ever do St. Petersburg and around there?
No.
Absolutely gorgeous. I mean, politics aside, you know, if we were all friends again, you know, some of the palaces that are in Russia, absolutely stunning. They give Versailles a run for their money, or any of the other European ones. So that, to me, something like that to me is a bucket list. Also, when we went to New Zealand, you start probably in Auckland and then you work your way down the coast. You go and see Wellington and Christchurch. Christchurch is a beautiful place. You then go see the geysers of Rotorua, where you see these sulfur plumes come up in the sky. Our bucket list is to see something that's a little bit unusual, you know, that you really think has been unusual to do that week or that month.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you're not doing 6-week jungle land trips and exotic cruises on junks, what do you do in your me time?
I tell you what, I like things very casual. We like to be quite social. I mean, one of the reasons we pick a particular cruise line is hopefully it's going to be a social environment. I mean, one of my most favorite things is just getting up in the morning, doesn't matter where we are around the world really, and just sitting down at a street side cafe with a cup of coffee or a glass of wine in your hand, and then just watching the world go by. I mean, I love moments like that, just drinking in the atmosphere, maybe with a small group of people chatting away, having a laugh and a smile. I could do that for hours, just watching the world go by in a really interesting, entertaining place.
You have any hobbies?
Photography, absolutely. I enjoy taking all of the photography for the videos we put out. I probably spend way too much money on all of the equipment. It's a bottomless pit. I don't know about you. I mean, there's so much you can tinker with. There's so much new tech that comes out. I like trying out drones, the new wireless microphones, 360 cameras, gimbal cameras. The photography, the whole essence of putting these videos together. I think that's why I enjoy putting the channel together, because there are various elements of it that I enjoy. The taking of the videos, the creative part, what do you show, what don't you show? Because generally when we go on a cruise, we take about, 10 to 20 hours of video per cruise. It's then a matter of whittling it down to a 45-minute production. Any longer than that, people fall asleep on you. So I enjoy the photography and the creative element part.
Bill, before we let you go, we usually ask our guests some light or fun cruise, dare I say, fun cruise question. First question, kind of selfishly designed because it helps me a lot. I get some great ideas from all of the wonderful guests I have. So, what's your favorite cruise drink and cruise food?
I do enjoy a cocktail. I mean, not many of them, obviously, because there's like a gazillion calories in a cocktail. So I try to not go too crazy, but I don't know, drink them at a measured pace. That generally puts a smile on your face, doesn't it? In terms of food, I like quite
Give me a couple of cocktails or at least one cocktail to try.
Oh, now you see, I'm no expert. So if you ask me for something fancy, actually, I wouldn't be able to do it. I tell you what, we were on Azamara last year, and they said, okay, there was a package for cocktails, and there weren't that many in it. And they suddenly wheeled out about cocktails I hadn't seen since the 1970s. And I thought, wow, I haven't. Right, for instance, a grasshopper. I hadn't had one of those for years and years, and it came out absolutely glow in the dark, like a chemistry experiment. Remember, you used to make copper sulfate crystals in your chemistry class at school, and they brought this thing out, and my wife was filming. She said, "Are you really going to drink this thing?" I thought, why not? And so I drank it, and it was like drinking mouthwash. There's a mouthwash here called Listerine. I don't know. Do you get it there in the States?
And, absolutely.
And it was, I don't know, I thought they ought to call this a Listerine martini or a Listerine teeny. But I was determined to get through it. So I went through it. And then they brought out a succession of other cocktails that the only reason I suppose it was on their free list at Azamara, because nobody in their right mind would drink them. But I tell you what, we were sitting down in a nice bar, a nice little section. It's called the living room on Azamara, and it was a nice cozy place. It was the end of the day. We were on the Italian Riviera. We'd had a fantastic day. We'd already had, I had, because my wife doesn't drink. I'd already had quite a lot to drink because it was one of their immersion evenings. That's why Azamara is so good, because it's one of the few cruise lines where they tailor the cuisine and the offerings to where you are. So because we were in the Italian Riviera, the food was largely of the era, and they were having all sorts of Prosecco drinks and everything else. And we already came back, and they had this huge vat of some local drinks. And so I'd already had a few of those before we then hit the bar to have some cocktails. So my wife thought, okay, let's film you. Let's have a cocktail challenge. I tell you what, halfway through that one, I probably wasn't making much sense. So the second half of that evening hit the cutting room floor because I was making no sense whatsoever.
How about food?
I like a broad range. I'm not allergic to anything in particular. Having spent a lot of time in Asia, I like a lot of spicy food. Having said that, I like Moroccan food, African food. rustic foods, Italian food. I'm not fussy. I'm quite a adventurous eater. I mean, as long as we go to some of these markets. If you go to Thailand, you'll see at the night markets, they've got cricket or tarantula, or they've got spiders on a stick. I generally don't have cockroach. You see that, you'll see roasted cockroach. Now, I don't go that far, but as long as it's, have you tried haggis, that Scottish delicacy?
No, I've heard of it.
Okay, well, that's one if you're feeling brave, if you've had a few cocktails, Paul. But generally, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to try anything once, see how it is.
I haven't heard of cockroaches either. That's wow. I have heard of scorpions on a stick. Some. In fact, I tend to ask. I just did an episode. It was in celebration of my of the podcast second birthday, and it's sort of like some selected sound bites of guests from year two. I did the same thing after my first birthday, and so I like to ask world travelers what's the most exotic foods that they've been presented with. So you just mentioned something new, cockroaches. You'll probably be in my third birthday retrospective. What is the most exotic food that you've tried?
I would say when we were in Peru, we did a fantastic cruise. That was with Swan Hellenic, which doesn't exist sadly anymore. That was a real expedition cruise. We started off in Barbados. We went through the Panama Canal and down, and we ended up in Peru. Around there, we did the Inca Trail and also Ecuador. They had all sorts of things. There was guinea pigs. There was all sorts of rodents. I think there were animals that they didn't really want to tell you what they were. They said, "Oh, well, I don't really know the English name." And this was in the days before Wikipedia, when I couldn't readily look up what it was. But we had things with any number of legs that I wasn't entirely sure what they are. In Asia, jellyfish is very popular. They have jellyfish salads.
Did you like it?
It's a texture thing. I tell you what, Paul, it's very squishy. They put it on their salads. That's an acquired taste. In Asia and Singapore, you have satay. They put all sorts of things on a satay stick. They'll put rabbit on a satay stick. They'll put wild boar. Wild boar is actually very nice. That's not exotic, but that's great.
Well, it's interesting. It has been interesting to hear some of the foods that you've been presented with. I won't be trying them, but it's interesting to hear it.
Oh, try snake. When we were in Hong Kong, they literally. I mean, it sounds terrible. I'm not in any way condoning this, but basically they give you live snake.
Oh my goodness!
And they cut it up, and it's still wriggling, and they particularly want to give you the innards of it, like the gallbladder or the bile or things like that, because they say that it's good for the men, and or you can buy what's called field mouse wine. You go into one of these. There's a very famous shop called the Chinese Products Emporium. I think it's still there. It certainly was in the 90s and 2000s. You got them in Hong Kong, across China, and anything you could imagine would be bottled up is in there. And there's one called Field Mouse Wine, where they take its rice wine, so a little bit like sake, and then they stick a field mouse in it. And it sits there and it ferments, and then you have it as an after dinner drink. Very, very potent, and it's got essence of field mouse in it.
All righty then. Question 2. What is your most wonderful or memorable or funniest or even most embarrassing cruise or port experience? So again, doesn't have to be all of those, but name one.
I think probably one of the most diverse. Let's put this under the enjoyable stroke almost had a terrible accident category. We were sailing in New Zealand, and we got to a place called Rotorua, which is a very historic place because a lot of the ethnic folk and tribes lived there at Rotorua. And they have a famous, in England we'd say geyser. Do you say a geyser? It's when you have one of these natural springs that are underground, and they erupt quite ferociously. And they put out plumes of sulfur. that go up sometimes 100 feet in the air. It's actually quite mesmerizing, and you can stand there. And we were filming it, and we were trying to get as close as possible to get a good angle, a good view on it. And we were edging closer and closer. And health and safety probably wasn't at its best. I can understand it's a natural place. They can't go railing off this rock formation. And so it was probably very difficult. So they were relying on people to show good judgment, which obviously failed me that day, or I'd been on the field mouse wine in the morning and or I'd had a Listerine cocktail at lunchtime and wasn't showing due caution and care and attention. And I was getting ever nearer and nearer, and it erupted, because you don't know what's going to happen. It could be every 5 minutes, it could be every 10 minutes, and it suddenly erupted. We thought, fantastic. You can hear it because you suddenly hear a gurgling. It's a bit like bad plumbing. You've got a heads up that it's about to happen. And suddenly this plume of sulfur shoots up in the ground, and you think, fantastic. And you've got about 5 seconds before you decide, am I going to run for my life, or have I basically committed to being here and see what happens? And then the sulfur comes down on you. First of all, it hurts because it's hot. It's a bit like being, I don't know, I would imagine in a volcanic eruption. Not as bad as that, but it's hot, and it's like the embers from a barbecue. So first of all, you got very hot, and then your clothes started to tinge. And then I ran where I thought was the right direction, because there was a little observation bridge, no rails on the side, a little observation bridge to get to. I ran where I thought was the right way. It wasn't the right way, because I was determined to film it as I did it, fatal mistake. And I almost fell head first into the water, which I learned later on was several hundred degrees or Fahrenheit in temperature. And I think I would have been like in one of those movies. I probably would have been vaporized.
Wow. That sounds that's very memorable.
Probably for the wrong reason. I mean, when you look back, you look at these things and you think, boy, I shouldn't have done that. Or last year, and a similar circumstance, I'll tell you very quickly, we were on a Norwegian fjords cruise. I don't know if you've been to the Norwegian fjords. And
no, I have one booked out of Southampton for late this year.
Yeah, those are beautiful. It's a really good alternative to Alaska. Totally different feel, totally different scenery. You get up very, very close. They're not snow-capped, unless you go in winter. In summer, they're not snow-capped like they are in Alaska. Anyway, we went up to the Briksdal Glacier because that's one of the attractions of going up there. And we went up there, and there was a raging river. And I suddenly had, again, this crazy idea. I don't know how many drinks I must be having at breakfast on these cruises, obviously way too many. And I thought, wouldn't it be fantastic to take a water bottle down there to try the water? So we crept down. I was there. We were there with our son and daughter. We don't often travel with them, but we did on this occasion. And I said to my daughter, who's fairly gung-ho, should we go down there? Our son was filming us. My wife said, I'm not going that close. Well done, her. Should listen to wives at all times. Well done, Mrs. Ritzy. Should always listen to her. She was filming it, and it was myself and my daughter. Both my son and my wife were filming it, one with a different camera to get different angles. And we went down and we edged closer, and the roar of it was so loud. And we got closer and closer. But you obviously got to get to it to take the water. So we managed to totter right down the edge, put our water flask in there, take it out. And it was the most beautiful, pure, fresh water you've ever drunk. But then suddenly a slightly larger torrent than was expected came. And when I look back at the video and I see how fast that water was going, it makes the raging rapids at Universal or Disney look tame in comparison. It's circumstances like that you think, if I had just stumbled the wrong way, I would have been in there on my daughter with it. It makes me shiver thinking about it. And somebody put a comment on the video when I put it up. They said, they said, are you crazy or are you on a death wish? Maybe they were more polite than that. I can't remember what the comment was, but it made me think back. And I tell you what, my daughter's life flashed before me. I thought I was crazy. What on earth was I doing?
Well, I've seen a lot of your videos. I'm going to find that one.
Yeah, it's the Norwegian fjords one. And I think you also will look at that and think, what on earth was he doing?
Last question. I called this one an oddball question. And the only reason I call it oddball is it doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with cruise. First of all, I know you have a large following, so welcome. to the many Ritzy Travel Guide fans and friends listening. We hope your fans have enjoyed what they have heard at the Joy of Cruising podcast, and we'll come back to listen to future episodes. Bill, so your fans can get to know you just a little better, share one thing that my listeners and your fans and friends don't know about Bill.
Oh, that's one. I tell you what, me and my wife often get into cooking competitions because we both like cooking. My wife actually is way better than me, so I don't know. That's a pointless competition that we get into. Because my wife likes three things, really. She loves cooking, she loves fashion, and she loves keeping fit. Now, there's two things I absolutely cannot get involved in. There's no way I can do anything about fashion, and I certainly don't keep fit. Anybody who's seen my videos will see that, whereas my wife keeps amazingly fit. But one thing I can have a stab at, I can have a go at, is cooking. So when we're at home, we both take turns. We like to hold dinner parties, nothing elaborate, nothing fancy. We just like to invite a few people over, and we say, okay, what theme can we dream up? What concept can we do? And then we have a go at it and we invite people around. But we both like cooking. So you can possibly imagine when I'm not out and about cruising or traveling, two things we both love to do, because we do a lot of things together. We get on so well. The two things we love to do together is sit at a cafe, having a coffee, or in my case, a wine, watching the world go by, and we both love cooking.
Do you have a signature dish?
Oh, now that tends to suggest you're any good at it, doesn't it? We both love, it depends. When you're on a health kick, because you know how it is, you go on a cruise, suddenly you're in a health kick, aren't you, when you come off, because you've got to shed those pounds, because if you don't, I mean, over the last couple of years, we've done more cruising than we've done ever. I've gained 10, 20 pounds. I'm sure the viewers have noticed I'm suddenly ballooning in every video that goes by. I have to think of ever more creative angles not to look like an absolute beached whale on my videos. So when we come off a cruise where we try to be healthy, so we have a lot of things like sashimi or sushi. We try to do vegetarian dishes. I like doing more traditional things. We love being out in the back garden, depending where we are around the world, having a spit roast or a barbecue. We have in England, when we're in England, we have an aga. I don't know if you've heard of those. Those are really old-fashioned traditional ovens where you put them in and it takes 3-4 hours to roast something.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So, yeah, I wouldn't profess any great ability, but I love to cook.
Well, Bill, it has been great speaking with you. Please I know you're going to have a wonderful trip to Asia. Thanks for coming on the Joy of Cruising podcast. We'd sure love to have you back, maybe in a year or so, if you will be back. I've enjoyed having this conversation, and I learned a lot. All the best to Ritzy Travel Guide. And as I like to say, we'll see you on the ocean.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's been an absolute pleasure being here. Thank you very much.
The Joy of Cruising and Cruising Interrupted, each $16.99 plus shipping, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again for $18.99, can be ordered at the link on thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com. For each of the three books, use the discount code Joy of Cruising Podcast and get $4 off. The Joy of Cruising books are also available at Amazon. Order the ebook at Amazon or your favorite online retailer. Stay in touch by joining the Joy of Cruising Podcast Facebook group or following the Joy of Cruising Podcast on Instagram. We're constantly adding new shows. Please leave a review and tell a friend about us. We hope you enjoyed this brief escape to the ocean. See you next week.